Grace and peace, everybody. Thank you so very much for hanging out with me on this evening. I have a special treat for you. I have a special interview. If you are familiar with the movie, The Essential Church, which is a great movie just discussing the things that happened to the church as a whole during 2020 and 2021. It was a fantastic movie. You heard it was mentioned at G3 that we were going to watch it there at G3. And because of some shenanigans here in Atlanta, we weren't able to. However, I do have a copy of it. I did watch it. It's outstanding. And this evening, I have the director, Shannon Halliday, here, who's going to talk a little bit about it. So I do thank you all so much. I do have some questions that I wanted to ask him, but if you have a question that you would like to ask, please feel free, as I always ask you to do. Please drop it in the chat. You can put a giant capital Q, or just write the word question, and I will do my best to try to field those questions and give him an opportunity to answer them. I do have it on good authority, though. He is not going to give you his credit card number. So don't waste your time asking him that. I already tried it. But I do want to thank you again tonight. So I'm going to bring Shannon in. We're going to have a great conversation. So welcome to Atlanta again. Shannon, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem, man. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Now, I was thinking you were going to be on like some California time, but you're on Eastern Standard Time. What are you up to?
Yeah, we are at the Arc experience. What is it?
Yep.
Yeah, the Arc. Yeah. And we're going to be showing the film at the Answer, and I think it's called Answers for Pastors or Answers. Yeah. So it's Answers in Genesis, and it's a
Hmm.
ministry convention conference for
Yep.
pastors. And going to be showing tonight, and I'm going to intro it, and then we're going to have a Q&A afterwards, which will be exciting.
I
So,
like it. I like it.
yeah, going to have a panel and some of the guys that were in the film, and yeah, it's going to be really fun.
I love it. So you know what? Let's talk about it now. The Essential Church. Can you give me just an overall? I've never seen the movie. I don't know what Jason's talking about. What would you say? Give me the overall 30-second elevator. What is it about?
Yeah, I'd say it's when the lockdowns happened and they
Hmm.
shut down the church. Three pastors decided to open their churches back up in defiance against the government, and they did this in the face of chaos and um, a world that wanted to comply and
Hmm.
was very much upset with us for opening because of the narrative at that time. So, these churches had not only the narrative against them, but they had the government, the police force. And on top of that, it's not just that story of the present church, which we see in Grace Community Church and the two Canadian churches, but
Right.
it is interwoven with church history
I
to
like it.
show that this is a
Yes.
cosmic conflict, and that is interwoven throughout the film because this is a recurring conflict that's happened throughout history, throughout the church history, and going back into scriptures, we see it happening there too.
I love it. Thank you so much. It was a great movie. So I really do like how you did that. First question, what inspired you to actually do this? I mean, most of us experienced the trauma of 2020 and 2021, but we didn't do movies about it. We didn't do interviews and a documentary. What inspired you to do that? Because again, I felt encouraged watching it. So what inspired you to do it?
Yeah, when we decided to open back up at Grace Community Church, a lot of people left our church. They were really upset with us. They were upset with John MacArthur. They thought he went off the rails. They did not understand what we were doing, and they didn't understand the process of how we came to the conclusion that we were going to open up and defy the government. So we thought, let's make a movie and just tell the story, um, and give the whole story. Like I said, church history as well as the global church, that was represented by our Canadian brothers, and let them see the whole thing and really pull back the curtain on really Grace Community Church, because we show that we were actually very much divided and our elders were divided. And we have over 40 elders, and we're elder ruled, and they do things with a protocol of unanimity. They
Mm-hmm.
have to be unanimous in all of their decisions. And so they had to get 40 men to agree to open back up. because after 2 weeks, John MacArthur and a few other pastors were ready to open back up, but the rest of the elders weren't. And so there had to be an argument really that had to take place in order to win over those other pastors. And as you saw in the movie, it wasn't without casualties.
All right, I like that. But wait. I was told that John MacArthur opened up his church. That J Mac went up to the door every Sunday, opened up the door, unlocked it, and flung the doors open, and did all that stuff. He did that himself. You mean to tell me that there were others involved in this?
Yeah,
Elder? I mean,
yeah,
really?
yeah. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people think. They think John MacArthur just runs
I
the
know.
church, that it's his
Right.
church, and it's just silly. It's Christ's church, and we have to go to Scripture, and all men have to be, convinced by their conscience through Scripture. And there was a process in getting there and understanding that. John MacArthur did do a few things, though. Like he didn't tell people to leave when they showed up.
He didn't.
So he was I don't know, for lack of a better saying, playing the game. I don't know. But he was definitely like, okay, you know, don't lock the doors. And if people show up, then they show up, and
Show up.
don't kick them out. People started showing up.
Did he encourage them to have coffee and donuts? Now that's going to be a good reason to draw people in. I'm a good Presbyterian. They will come if you draw some good coffee. They will come. They will come.
No coffee, no donuts,
Oh
no
man.
smoke machines, no rock bands, no
Oh my
fancy
gosh.
lights. Yeah,
Just
no,
good old
nothing.
preaching, huh?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So that's a great point that you made, that you all didn't come out of this unscathed.
That's right.
What would you want? I left Grace Community Church because I didn't like the way things were going. I didn't like it. Now I see this movie here. What do you want me to take away from this movie? And maybe even consider, I might be a spiritual nomad, or maybe I just found a church to land at because I'm angry and mad still. But what do you want me to take away from this movie?
Well, first thing is that it was not a careless decision. It was a fought for decision. It was a carefully thought through decision, and men had to convince other men who loved Jesus to do it. And that took time and a lot of effort and a lot of study, a lot
Mhm.
of, biblical. They had to dive into really some of the church history. If you look at our statement, it references the Covenanters, it references the Great Ejection. Um, and that's really was the springboard for me that started my journey in understanding those references and why our elders referenced those times in church history, and that's why I landed those on the movie. So I'd want them to look at all of that, the whole picture, and know that this was we're not alone. That throughout
Right.
history, Christians had to come together and think about biblically why I can tell the state that they don't have jurisdiction in the church. Even when they
Wow.
say it's an emergency, they don't have jurisdiction. There's no loopholes there. So that's one thing that I hope they get out of it. The other thing is uh, that they would be, well, going back to the argument, that they would be more convinced on the argument, understand that we weren't being unloving, because that was the narrative. You're
For
unloving.
sure. Yeah.
You didn't love your neighbor. I was doing the loving thing by not going to church.
Hmm.
And the documentary looks into that. Was that really true? That you're not being loving by going to church? And we go and talk to, not only we look at that in three aspects. We look at it the scientific, and that's when I went and spoke with Scott Atlas and Jay
Yep.
Bhattacharya up at
Hmm.
Stanford, and they spoke about the statistics of the lockdowns and what it actually accomplished and what it didn't. And it's mind blowing how destructive it was. It was far more destructive than this so-called pandemic.
Good.
Um, and then it just went into the command that we are commanded to go to church, and we see this in the Bible, and we see it practiced throughout church history. And that also lands us with the Covenanters in Scotland, which again is a big part of the documentary. So I would hope that they would see that and consider, and they go, yeah, they have a good argument there, and maybe we would win them over. And if not, then at least they would understand that it wasn't just arrogance, or it wasn't arrogance at all.
Right.
And I think a lot of people look at it and they say we were being arrogant, and it had nothing to do with that. It had nothing to do with arrogance. That's just, they're just putting that onto us rather than actually looking at what we actually did and I guess expositing our story, and not practicing eisegesis on our story and putting meaning onto it, but really go into it and say, okay, this is what they did, and it wasn't out of arrogance, and it was thoughtful, and it was careful, and it was rough and messy.
Amen. So, looking at this movie in light of the other situations and instances in church history, how do you see this movie aiding in a deeper understanding of what happened in the past, and heavens forbid, what could potentially happen in the future? How do you see this movie, Essential Church, playing a role in that, understanding the past and looking toward the future?
Yeah, there's a line from Ian Hamilton, and he says we need to be look to the past, learn from the past.
Yeah.
We have to look to the past and learn from the past. So, God was sovereign over all of that. And when we look to past brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ who had to work through things biblically and
Mm-hmm.
why they did it, they've left a trail for us, and we can look at what they looked at and learn from that. And I think that what that communicates, and what it was so important to me to have the church history aspect in it, is that it says that what we're dealing with actually transcends what we're doing. It transcends the movie. It's a
Okay.
transcendent element, because if I just focused on just our story and I didn't bring in that transcendent element, 20 years from now, maybe it wouldn't really apply. Because I think by looking at the church history aspect of it, I think they'll understand that this is a principle, this is a truth that transcends this time, our COVID time, because it's happened in the past, and the same principles take effect now, and they'll take effect in the future. And it's important to understand that.
I love it. Thank you so much. All right, let me get a couple of comments in here. And if you're just joining us, of course, I'm Jason Whitaker, Dear Will Christian, and I have Shannon Halliday, the director of the movie Essential Church, and I have my copy right here. You cannot have my copy, but you will be able, Shannon will let you know how you can see it, because we've put the link in the chat already, essentialchurchmovie.com, where you can see it. And I want to go over, if you have a question for him, please feel free to drop your question in the chat. Put the word question or capital Q in front of it, and I'll make sure we ask it. So a couple of notes of encouragement. Kristen just says the Essential Church movie is such a blessing to the church. Now, I thought this was interesting from Custom. Convinced of their conscience through scripture. That needs to be into a YouTube short. Don't worry about it. I clipped it already. That right there is exactly why I became a cessationist. I love it. And Betty says perhaps it would give courage to the next onslaught. And I think she's referring to my question about how would this movie impact us in the future. And then lastly, just good old, nothing wrong with some good old tulips every now and then from Federal Times Theology. All right. Now, I've never done a movie before, and I don't know what your movie background is. How difficult is it to gather? How long was this? It's about 90 minutes, 110 minutes. How long was this movie?
Yeah, it was just over 2 hours. I think with the credits, it's like 2 hours and 4 minutes or 2 hours and 6 minutes, something like that.
How difficult is it to gather all of that because I could only imagine what was on the cutting room floor. I would love to see, as much as I love the movie, I probably would love to see the cutting room floor just as much. Like, I'm sure you weren't able to put everything. How do you pick what you're going to put into a movie like this?
Yeah, it's really hard. You do, when you make a movie like this, especially a documentary, is I wrote a script,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very loose, except for the church history parts. I knew where I was going to put that. I knew I was going to open with what I opened with, and then end the first act with her same story, ending that story and connecting it to the national covenant in 1638 and our statement. So they came out with a statement in Scotland, um, concerning the same matter, that
Mm-hmm.
the state was, encroaching into the
Coaching.
church, and they did not have the jurisdiction to do that, and why they were going to take a stand on that. So I knew things like that, but I didn't. And I researched the story and did pre-interviews to understand where things were going, and so that really helps in making sure you're asking the right questions, and you're getting it where it needs to be, and you're not asking, hopefully, a lot of ridiculous stuff. Although I asked John MacArthur a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with
Hey, send me that. Send me that. I want
oh my,
those. Send
I
them to
have
me. Come on.
literally, I probably have like 8 to 10 hours where I
I'll
just
send you my
asked him about his
Dropbox.
whole life. I know.
I'll send you my Dropbox.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Um, so there was lots of stuff like that. And at one point, the movie was 3 hours long. But you just ask yourself as a filmmaker, what is the story? What is the root idea? And there were many things that were cathartic and that I very much fell in love with. But I realized I got to cut that because it's technically a rabbit trail, and it's slowing my story down.
Hmm.
And at this rate, it's going to be 4 hours. So I had to get it down. I got it down at one point to 1 hour and 50 or like 48 minutes, which was really good. I was really happy with that. And then I realized I needed to add some more scenes to it. And then it got back up to 2 hours, which I wasn't too happy with, but I couldn't avoid it. The story was better with those extra 10 to 12 minutes. So I made it 2 hours long. But yeah, you just ask yourself as a filmmaker, what is moving the story forward? What would be redundant? Because I did leave things out. I left out, for example, that the city took our parking
Parking
away.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
and
wondering where that was.
yeah, people were upset about that. They're like, "Where is that?" And the
That
reason I
was
left it out, yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Like
that was
it
petty.
was, yeah, it was. They were, it was clearly vengeful. Like we're in the middle of this, and they're finding a way to come after us. The thing is they own the wash that is next to our church, and on that wash, there's an easement on both sides that we lease from them. And we pay them a lot of money. Actually, they make a lot of money that they would not make otherwise, and it would just sit there empty because you can't build on it, but you can
Right.
put a parking lot. So they were going to take that away from us, which would in turn take away car spots, which would then legally say you can't have X amount of people in the sanctuary because you don't have legally the
I know.
code for the parking.
Yep.
So, but that's a
Wow.
lot to explain, first of all. And
Yeah.
and the point of it is to say this is personal. And so when I had JMac, Dr. MacArthur, I don't want to sound
Hmm.
disrespectful. We call him JMac, and personally, he loves it. But people complain to me or say you're not supposed to call him that. But
We do
he
too.
doesn't
Don't
care.
worry.
Yeah, he loves it. Anyways, Dr. MacArthur, uh, you know, when they called him up and said, "Hey, you have to abide by some restrictions," which he was refusing to do. And everybody else, he was the only one refusing to do that. That was like his main thing is I am not putting on a mask. I'm not going to tell people they have to put on a mask. They can if they
Right.
want, but I'm not telling them to do anything.
Right.
And I'm not telling them to social distance. I'm not going to do that. They can decide that for themselves. Um, so
Wow.
when they came back to him, the lawyers, and you saw in the movie, they
Hmm.
knew that. They're like, oh man, I got to tell this guy who's staunch on this that, hey, we probably should do this, and we'll be able to have church. And MacArthur said, you know what, do it. I'm giving away a lot because you're going to see this in the documentary. Like, go ahead and do it because they don't want us to have church at all. They want it all. They want the
Right.
church shut down. They don't want reasonableness at all. They want the complete authority over the church. And so go ahead because it won't be good enough for them. And sure enough, I mean, within hours, they appealed that and went back, and then it was back to square one. So that proves that it's personal.
Hmm.
So I have a choice. I have a protagonist as a storyteller, filmmaker. When the protagonist is moving the story forward, which John MacArthur is part of the protagonist, he's part of the
Hmm.
church represented in these three pastors. That's really strong as in a story element. You want the protagonist to be moving the story forward. And so then to add the parking thing not only just makes my movie longer, and you have to spend all this time expositionally trying to explain people what it means and where it
Right.
is, and I have to show pictures of it and explaining all that, that captures it right there. So that's how you make a choice. You're making a movie, you got to make choices that you're not redundant because that makes your movie slow, and look for more action kind of from your protagonist where he's making the choice and moving it forward. That's powerful in storytelling. So that's naturally where I went. So you make choices like that, and you got to cut things out that don't accomplish that.
No, I love it. I loved it. Now, speaking of moving the story forward, I want to jump from California. I want to jump north of the border. And I'm not going to talk about James. I want to talk about Tim Stevens. I do feel like I got slighted a little bit on Tim's story, but watching him get arrested for the second time at his home, you should have given some tissues with
Yeah.
the video. I'm like, come on now, why are you
Yeah.
doing this to me? I'm like, I'm a black man in here crying like a child in here. I mean, this is not cool. That was a very powerful imagery of, again, the pettiness. I'm just going to say there's nothing more than that. The pettiness of our government systems when they came to arrest that man. Again, and they knew good and well there was no reason to do it.
Yeah.
And then for them to still do it was just, I understand you're doing a job, but no, not every job needs to be done. So no,
Yeah.
that was a great. Did you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, I would just say this, that Tim was really a connection through James. So the story led us to James because James was connected to the seminary. But then James' story led us to Tim because they were friends and they were encouraging and dealing, kind of even strategizing with one another through this, to some degree. And it's hard to fit all of that in there. And Tim's story is interesting. And I got the parts that were, like you said, most impactful and tear jerking. But yeah, I mean, I could have stayed there with Tim for a few more days, and I only got one day with him. So I got his interview. I got what quick shots I could get, and then I had to get out of there. And a lot it had to do with resources. We don't have unlimited resources, and we don't have unlimited time, and people are already barking at me. And nobody had seen the movie at that point, so they didn't know what they were going to get. People are just kind of like on faith, expecting, okay, I hope it's good. But when the dollar signs start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, they're like, okay, you got to come home. We need to. No, you got to stop spending money. So that's what you're dealing with when you're making a film. It's especially when you don't have unlimited resources. We're not a big studio. We're a big church, but we're not a church that really makes movies. So this is new ground for us. So there's sometimes a little sticker shock that comes along with that.
Oh yeah.
So
for
baby steps. But we did what we could. I got as much as I could in the time that I could. I had deadlines that I had to meet, and that's just the way it goes.
No, it was excellent. Now, here's a question. Since we're talking about that, I think this is pretty good. Alton Johnson, another content creator here in Atlanta, says, I'm working on a Hebrew Israelite documentary. Any advice on promotion?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to probably ask a lot of questions and things like that, but I would say you got to start promoting now, and look at people that have been successful in what they've done. So if I don't know how when you say promotion, I imagine he's already made the film, or he says he's working on it. So if he's in the middle of working on it and he needs money, then he should just be constantly putting out BTS and putting little 3-minute shorts out to people constantly on a channel like this YouTube channel, and get people excited about that. Fortunately for us, we have a large network. That's one thing we do have. Grace Community Church has been around for 50 or 60 years. John MacArthur has been at it for 50 years. So we have a big network to reach out to. So you got to just build that network and keep putting it out there. I would say also do things like this, and find your audience. Think about where your audience might be gathering together and try to get your stuff in front of them. But yeah, it's hard.
That's good. All right. And you said something, you used a little bit of insider baseball speak. Did you say BTS, or what was that?
Yeah. Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Get your behind the scenes. So film the stuff that you're doing so you can communicate with the people and show them your progress and get them excited. And then show them, and go out and find your audience. You got to go out and start finding your audience now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Alton, he gave you thumbs up. So I think that was very helpful. So I appreciate it.
All
right. Now, I started this channel to provoke critical thinking as it relates around social justice, Black Lives Matters, and such like that during the Summer of Love of 2020. Do you see any parallels between what I'm doing as it relates to encouraging people to search the scriptures to see if what I'm saying is true, or if what your prognosticator or your lecturer or your pastor is saying is true. Do you see any parallels between that and what you've done rather, with the Essential
Yeah,
Church?
sure. I mean, you're putting truth out there, and you're encouraging people to consider, to be discerning, to be good Bereans, right? To not just take everything at face value. A lot of people looked at Romans 13 and had a very one-dimensional look at it, and there was lots of argumentation over that, and you had to then, encourage people to look for themselves at Romans 13 and to go further.
Right.
Just like we have Riccardi, who's again looking to the past of Martin Lloyd Jones in church
Hmm.
history, and his book on Romans 13, his commentary, and we show that evolution in the documentary. Um, and he read more books than that. I mean, I had at one point little segment was like 3 times as long, but
Wow.
again, you gotta you gotta keep it moving. So I just focused on the big man, which would be Martin Lloyd Jones.
For sure.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, you got to go deeper, and that's what you're encouraging your audience to do. And I think that that's what the Essential Church does. And we find ourselves doing that because we know how weak the American evangelical church is.
Right.
And we had it good for a long time. At the
Long time.
beginning of this country, the government seemed like it was on our side.
For
We
sure.
didn't have this problem. We didn't have to exercise this muscle. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, it took a little while. We saw it
Right.
coming, but then when it happened, you're like, really? This is how it's going to happen? So it was still surprising, but yeah, and then we have to exercise that. Now we're stronger because. So I think the film shows that, and yeah, your show and other shows like yours that are aiming to do the same thing is needed.
Amen. Appreciate it. Now, I do
Yeah.
want I thought about something else. I'm going to go back to Alton's question. And you said that he needs to find his audience, find his audience. Who's
Hmm.
the audience? Who's the ideal audience for Essential Church?
Yeah.
I proposed to you the idea of people that left Grace Community Church, and you
Yeah.
explained, how they would receive this. But who did you intend this movie for?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it is intended for Christians.
Okay.
I'd be lying if I didn't say that. We
No, no,
obviously need Christians. Like, if you put it's not a business, it's a ministry. But if you want
mhm,
people to watch it, who are the first people that are going to watch it? It's going to be Christians because they're interested in the subject matter.
for
But
sure.
I think that it's provoking enough, and I think that it's a film. It's
Hmm.
not a master class. It's not a lecture. It's a film. It's a documentary. So that means it's a story, and therefore, it does go beyond our circles and not just in our reformed circles where everybody agrees with us. Because I think people who don't agree, and I have had people watch it that don't agree, that were surprised and or
Hmm.
and enjoyed it, or didn't know that they were going to be interested in it, and then found it to be compelling
Oh,
um,
after the fact.
after the fact. So I think
Oh,
that
okay. Okay.
So I think that the movie's audience, first and foremost, is believers. You want believers to come and support it, just
Hmm.
as he needs to make a film, but he needs people to go and see it, right?
That's correct.
But obviously, he needs to tell a story so that it's not just appealing because of the subject matter, but because somebody wants to actually watch this story unfold.
Right.
And it's interesting and it's compelling, and that then you expand your audience to unbelievers and things like that. So I think that yeah, that's my answer. It starts with the Christians, but it doesn't end there. But if you don't start with the Christians, then no one's really going to go watch it, probably.
No, no, no.
What I'm saying?
No, I totally get you. Totally
Just
get it.
being honest with you.
No, I totally get it. So, all right, peel back the curtain a little bit. What kind of
Yeah,
things do you have planned in the future? What kind of projects do you have moving forward from Essential Church? Where are you going next?
yeah. We don't know the next big project like the Essential Church. We don't know that yet. We're still thinking about that. I have some thoughts, but I'm not going to share them now. But one thing I am working on right now is a kids show that started during the lockdowns, and it's called Adventures with Ranger Joe. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, But it's for kids. It's kind of, it started as kind of our Sunday school video skit.
Okay.
So during the lockdowns, they decided to make these teaching stories, and they
Hmm.
called this character Ranger Joe, and they would send it out to the parents. And during the lockdowns, nobody was leaving, nobody's going to work, they couldn't go anywhere, and they couldn't go to church. So that was kind of like their Sunday school. So they would plop their kids down in front of the TV and they would watch that. So when the lockdowns ended, Ranger Joe ended, but we thought, hey, let's see if we can develop this a little further. And then, so the second season, I made it a little bit more sitcom for kids. So it was a
Okay.
bit of an upgrade, and in the story had more of a beginning, middle, and end. We built a cabin and put them in there. So we started expanding the world a little bit. And now this third season, we're hoping to upgrade it a little bit even more. And so we're doing 12 episodes for Adventures
Wow.
with Ranger Joe, and that's basically a TV show for kids that hopefully we'll be putting out in 2024, probably. I'm guessing end of 2024 is my guess. We'll see.
Okay. Wow, that's kind of neat. Thank you. All right, got
Hmm.
a question for you. Betty asks, does the movie present the gospel if you want unbelievers to watch it?
Yes, it absolutely presents the gospel in it, and so it is a movie that is evangelistic. So that was the other thing, is that the Christians would then go out and find their unbelieving friends and bring them to the movie, and they would understand that this is an evangelistic opportunity. And so the gospel is presented in the context that Christ is head of the church, and it kind of moves into that from Christ being the head of the church, and we understand why through the gospel.
Hmm.
So absolutely shares the gospel. And actually, it's one of my favorite parts in the film. When I finished editing that, I was really pleased just the way we went with it, and I just love that part.
All right. So we've gotten out of the lockdowns. We've gotten out of the Charlie Victor 19 hysteria. What's been the relationship with Grace Community Church and the city of Los Angeles, or even the state of California, your neighbors? What's that relationship like now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think everybody kind of pretends it didn't happen.
No, that's true. That's 100%
Yeah,
true.
I think it's like they are trying to forget that they did that, and they don't want to be blamed for it, and they act as if it didn't happen. I think even Gavin Newsom was asked recently. Somebody sent me the article where he was asked about the shutdown of the churches, and he says, "Well, we didn't really know what we were doing, and whatever." He just wants to get as far away from it and not take any responsibility for it at all. So he's claiming ignorance now.
Is
Um,
he claiming it though?
yeah.
Is he just claiming it? I'm sorry. Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah. So it's I would say that they're just kind of silent, and I think it's embarrassing for them because
Hmm.
they had to basically settle because they knew there was no way out. They would lose if they
Right.
continued forward, and they would have to perjure themselves. And there's no way they're going to put health officials up there, because the health officials are going to be like, "I don't know why we did that. I don't know why we had that policy. Was it established in any science? No, not that I know of. It was just random, and we just decided that's what we were going to do." Um,
Wow.
and so they're they're not going to get on the stand and say that. So they don't want to act as if it didn't happen. Now, I think people, probably neighbors, I haven't gone out and talked to every single neighbor, but they're probably still, some of them are under the assumption that we meeting killed people. But I don't know if I
Hmm.
can convince those people. They're just going to think that the rest of their life. They bought into the narrative that they bought into, and I don't know if I can talk them out of it. Um, so here's an interesting development. Chris Hamilton, one of
Okay.
the elders at Grace Community Church, and he was in the film. His
Hmm.
part was actually really necessary for the film because he really tells the story of the elders really well. Um, but he had shared with me that they had recently passed a law that now it would be a felony for a police officer not to obey orders from the health department through an emergency act and not arrest people. So
Really?
they themselves, because the LAPD essentially refused to arrest us. That's the only reason we weren't arrested.
I
The
got you.
LAPD said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to walk in there and arrest those people. If you want them arrested, then you figure out how to do it. But we deal with crimes. So if you know of
Right,
anybody
right.
that's robbed somebody or anybody that's got murdered, that's what we deal with. We deal with that kind of stuff. But we don't arrest people because you have a health policy that you just made up.
Correct.
Um, but that's changed, and really, we're on an
Wow.
edge. We're on an edge of a knife there because up in Canada, the officers had no problem obeying those orders, and they
No,
were
they
going to
were
arrest everybody.
right.
Um, and I'm surprised in LA that we still had a remnant of people that were like, "Yeah, we're not doing that." But we had a really good relationship with the police that had been
Right.
going on for decades. We have always been a friend of the police. We've let them use our campus for training. Um, you know, uh, as the documentary shows, they were allowed to come to church with us
Yep. I
during
saw
the
that.
lockdowns, which was kind of like the snowball effect. It started with the police
Right.
coming to church, which then spurred on our congregation to come to church. So now, if they don't arrest us, that's what Chris Hamilton told me, is now there's a law in place that they could be in really big trouble. So if this
Wow.
happens again, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Gotcha. Amazing. Amazing that they would even come up with that. But it
Yeah,
doesn't surprise me. I don't know why I even said amazing. It doesn't surprise me
yeah,
that they would try to backdoor something in like that
yeah,
to force the hands of the law enforcement when sadly, I mean, as you articulated in the documentary, the mostly peaceful protests were going on and several other things were going on, but church couldn't. And it's very quick when you look at it, when you step back and look at it, it's very easy to see this has nothing to do with the mostly peaceful protests.
that's
This has
right.
nothing to do with the riots. This has nothing to do with restaurants and movie theaters or amusement parks. It has 100% everything to do with the church. I told people, I said, you realize every one of the stipulations they put in place negatively impacts the church. From just being able to see people's faces to social distancing to all of those things. Those are things that we as members of a church community violate on a regular basis. We always should be, being close to one another, involved with one another. It doesn't. There's no mandate that thou shalt be close to one another at Six Flags. There's no
Right.
mandate that thou must smile at somebody and show brotherly love to somebody at Walmart at aisle 7. However, in the church, every one of those mandates that they ask us to do negatively impacted the church. And
Yeah.
anything else was just collateral, from schools
Yeah.
to amusement parks to gyms. All that stuff was just collateral. But the
Yeah.
main negative impact was the church. Um,
Yeah.
I think I saw
And
another question.
we
Go
we
ahead.
know we know as Christians, I don't think those people. If you ask those people, you're like, "You're doing this to target the church," and they would probably say, "No, I'm not."
Of
And they
course not.
might be right in their hearts and in their minds. They're not actually thinking I'm targeting the church, but we know that there's something beyond those people, and that
Absolutely.
the world lays in the lap of Satan. So the Christian should beware. The Christian should be constantly, you know, wondering, hey, is what I'm being told by the government actually true? And
Right.
because the world does lay in the lap of of Satan, so maybe I should reconsider what's being said here. Not necessarily reconsider, but look into it. Don't just take it and say, oh, it must be true. The government said it, um, and understand what's really behind these things.
I told people there's zero problem with taking your time to educate yourself and learn and make sure you understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing. Because, like, for example, during the riots, there'll still be buildings to burn down. Don't worry about it. There'll still be extra Molotov cocktails to throw and Apple stores to raid. But maybe, just maybe, you should take your time and ask yourself, how is this honoring unto Christ? Now, you might come to the revelation that burning down a city is going to honor Christ. I'm going to disagree with you, but you go with your conscience. But at least take the time. Don't run with the narrative, because once they get you thinking, once they get you into an emotional state, you will not go back to a logical state. So just take your time, look at the evidence. Is this a good reason for me to besmirch the name of Christ and besmirch my brothers and sisters of less melanin? Is this a good reason to do this? Is this a good reason? Maybe, just maybe it's not. And another great point that you brought up in the movie is just the negative impact that people did not, the collateral damage that people had no idea that would happen. Like, for example, people being locked in their houses and they're bona fide extroverts. Like
Yeah.
don't tell anybody, but my mom is a dyed in the wool extrovert. Like she cannot. And for her to have to stay in the house for days upon weeks upon entirely too long, that was cruel and unusual to her. And I mean,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Why are you over here? I'm sorry. Go ahead and say hi.
Hi, how are you?
I have no idea what she has on her face. Could you please go away?
She's doing
What are you
lunges.
I
doing?
gotta heal the pimples.
I'm interviewing. Oh my gosh.
So,
This is live
the
too.
movie
Your
producer?
pimples are live.
I'll watch your movie.
Yes. You what? This is President Firstborn.
Hi.
Okay,
Hi,
goodbye.
how are you?
She's good. I can't believe her. This is what I get because I left my door open. I left my door open and I knew it. I said I should probably shut my door. Oh, never mind. Here we go. Come on, just come on. Now the other one's here. There we go.
Hello.
Anybody else? Anybody else in the house want to come by?
Come here.
You want to bring a plant? Oh my gosh. I really wish you could see the shenanigans. Shut my door, please. This is why I have a studio and this is why I should be
Yeah.
there.
That
Good
sounds
night.
like fun.
Oh my gosh, they're crazy. These are my people, man. These are my people. But they never do this, and it's only because I left the door open. I was asking myself, why is that door open? But I didn't. That's what I get. Well, okay. Nicholas said, I think what everybody should probably do, which is, hey, y'all, shalom. Sounds like I need to go back and watch this movie, this one in its entirety. Go back and watch it. Absolutely. I think you would really enjoy it. And if you're looking for it, it is on the Essential Church. Let me drop that link again. EssentialChurchMovie.com. And I'm dropping the link in the chat
Yeah.
one more time. And I'll
Yeah,
leave it in the description as well.
Yeah. EssentialChurchMovie.com. It has the Blu-ray DVD set, which gives you extra interviews. So that Scott Atlas interview I talked about, he actually served on the task force. I know. People are interrupting me too,
See?
just like you.
There it is, man, because we're cool, man. We're just cool kids. That's why.
EssentialChurchMovie.com. Yes, so on the Blu-ray, it'll have extra bonus features of Scott Atlas, and he was on the task force for Trump. So he was face to face with Fauci and Birx and arguing about the lockdowns and whether or not it should be done, and trying to convince Trump to say, hey, you need to remove these people.
You're right.
So he has
If
all of
only he
these
had.
insane. Yeah, it was a big mistake. And
Right.
Jay Bhattacharya talks about that as well. So there's extra interview stuff about that is fascinating. That's only on the Blu-ray. Now, what they just told me through the door there was that, and they were reminding, but I already knew. I know these things. Tomorrow, the streaming drops, and it's streaming everywhere tomorrow. So I think that means on Apple, on Amazon, you can rent it or download it to watch it, or it's part of your stream if you pay for that. I don't know. So it's all those kinds of things. It's going to be on your Android. So you
Nice.
can now digitally go and watch it. So you don't have to have a physical copy if you don't need a physical copy. You can almost get it everywhere. And it's also on Salem now, I think. So it's digitally available tomorrow everywhere. You can get the Blu-ray DVD from the website, which I think is awesome because it's Blu-ray. It's a beautiful film. It's 4K. And you get that bonus stuff and how we did the music and all that stuff. The music's fantastic in it, the score. You can also listen to that on Spotify, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And let's see. Yeah, that's it. And the one you got is the one we handed out for free.
Right.
Because there's something, and I wanted to say this earlier. You had the gentleman in the chat said maybe I should actually watch this. I think the reason some people aren't interested at first is because we all have COVID fatigue.
Right.
And we all know what happened, and we know where we are at it. We know what our take is on it. So it's well, I don't need to watch that because I've already come to my conclusion.
I lived
and even
it.
and they might
Right.
even agree with where I'm at. So it's I don't really need to watch it. But it's actually I think that it's deceiving because it's not really about COVID. It's
No,
about the
I agree.
church.
Yes.
And it's fascinating as a result of that. It's about the transcendent. It's not about a temporary time in history. It's about how we who worship the true and living God need to respond to the state regardless of the encroachment of where it comes from or in
And
what
I
context.
I think you did a great job of that too, because I can see why somebody would say, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
another COVID movie." I can see that, but you didn't. It was
yeah,
about the church, and that. So
yeah,
yeah, I would highly encourage you to see it because it is about the church.
yeah.
In a
Like that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the Daily Wire guys, I think they have COVID fatigue. And so when we pushed it out to them, they weren't super eager to really talk about it. I got on the Andrew Klavan show and talked about it, which was great because
Hmm.
he watched it. And the reason he watched it is because Jenna Ellis, who's in it, made him because they're
Yep.
friends. And she's like, no, you need to watch it. He's like, he kept saying no. He's like, no, just watch it. And he said, well, okay, but I'm not going to talk about it if it's not good. So don't get your hopes up. And then he watched it. And the next day he's like, okay, I love it. It was really smart. How can I get the director on?
Very
And
good.
he talks about how Ben Shapiro said, whenever we talk about COVID, our numbers go down. People just aren't interested. And I get that.
Oh
But
yeah.
they should make an exception for this film.
Well, I agree with that. I agree, especially I don't expect Ben Shapiro to wrestle through the idea that this is about the church, not about Charlie Vector 19. However, I would hope that other people smarter than that can help him see, like, no, this is a good reason. Even if the
Yeah.
numbers do tank, if the numbers do take a dip, it's a good
Yeah.
reason to let the numbers do what they're going to do. But the message is very clear, and it's a good
Yeah.
message. Um, did you, in your travels, were there any other pastors that you spoke with and that maybe didn't make the three that you highlighted in the movie? Were there any others that you talked to that were like, man, that was a good conversation with that guy in Kentucky, or I had a good conversation with that person in Omaha, but they just didn't make the cut?
Yeah. I wanted to talk to Jacob Rayom. Are you
Okay.
familiar with him?
I'm not, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. Yeah, so look his church up. I forget the name of his church. I believe he's in Toronto.
Okay.
Um, and I was actually scheduled to meet with him, but I stayed longer in Scotland because I discovered some different shots that I wanted to get.
Hmm.
And it was all that Glencoe stuff with the big mountains and the big
Very nice.
ravine and
Yep.
yeah, all that stuff. I was like, okay, I got to reshoot everything, but in that ravine, that giant like area. And it was beautiful. So I stayed an extra day or two because of that, which was worth it. But I had to cancel his interview. And again, the resources. But Jacob Riom is still being persecuted by the Canadians. And while they have dropped James Coates and Tim Stevens' suits, they have not dropped his, and he has millions of dollars he owes the state, and they're holding him to it.
Wow.
Uh, yeah.
So
So
Edmonton and all of them, when they dropped the cases and the fines, they didn't drop it on him.
they didn't for some reason, and I don't know
Wow.
why. But they're making an example of him, I guess. Um, So, anyways, Jacob Riom, I forget the name of his church, but look him up, and pray for him, and you know, hopefully he'll be fine. I mean, he understands what's going on, and I think he even made a documentary about his situation. I forget the name of it. Um, anyway, and then I was going to go to the guys in Moscow, Idaho, Doug Wilson and those guys. I was
Okay.
going to. Uh, they were on my list, but I never even reached out because it's like this isn't going to happen. I don't have enough time, and I got
Right.
my story. I can't keep expanding it further and further. I got to pick the guys that I'm going to pick, and they'll represent the global concept
Okay.
conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, those two guys. Those are two guys that I didn't get to that I probably would have wanted to. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Well, as we're rounding the bases, Talib asked a question I think was really appropriate. Has anyone returned after the initial disagreement over how to handle COVID? Has
Yeah,
anybody, people that left the church because they didn't like the way the church handled it, have any of them come back that you know of?
I know of people that didn't leave but still secretly disagreed. So
Okay.
they stayed, but they were like, but I think it was stupid what we did, and I don't really understand it. And I think it was hypocritical to preach that we're supposed to submit to the government and then not submit to the government. And you're just picking and choosing, but they stayed. And some of those people, I know of, one person recently, she was telling me her boyfriend completely changed his mind, and the film changed his mind. And he
Hmm.
did not, now he understood what really went on. And he was like, oh, I see what happened. And now he's more understanding and actually agrees with what we did. I don't know if people have come back though, and I think Chris Hamilton says that in the documentary. He begged people,
Yeah.
come back to
Come
Grace
back.
one more time, and they wouldn't do it. And he said, "Look,
Wow.
I'll set you up chairs. I'll have hand sanitizer there. We'll have masks for you. You can sit outside and social distance. Just come back one more time."
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it. Yeah,
I
so
mean, it's sad.
it
It's
was.
unfortunate, but
Yeah, well, it was a real sifting of the church. Our church, people left, but the people that replaced them are still replacing them. We call them the
right, right.
refugees. And Grace Community Church, we just put in 200 members last week, and that
Wow.
happens every month. We're doing 80 to 100 people a month on the average. Last week
Wow.
was 200 people. Um, New people, like, and they're
Hmm.
getting baptized. I mean, tons of baptisms. People started coming to our church. I know of a gentleman. I know people in the industry that are going to our church who would never have come, but they kept hearing us in the news, and
Yep.
everything was locked down, and they're like, you know what? I don't agree with what's going on, and something evil is happening, and I don't know what it is, and I want answers. And they, because we are open, we're the only ones open. They're like, well,
Wow.
go to those people. They're making a stand. It seems like they know what's going on. Let me go talk to them and
Hmm.
ask them what's going on. And then some of those people became Christians, and they're going to our church still today.
That's amazing.
Um, yeah, and that happened at all of our churches. All the churches that took a stand, I've yet to see one that has gone down in numbers. Rather, gone up in their numbers, and they're thriving. And it's new people, some people from other churches who are
Hmm.
Christians but were disappointed with their church, and as a result, they're now under better teaching. It was like the
Yep.
Lord said, "I'm going to move you to where you're hearing expository preaching. I'm going to take you away from this watered down, I wouldn't say heretical, but just not that you're not getting fed the way you should be getting fed. And I'm going to put
For
you
sure.
here." And that happened all over the place with
Yeah.
churches that opened up. The churches that stayed closed, they're the ones suffering. And they really
That
missed
would
an
be
they missed an opportunity. They really
that
did.
would be a fun documentary or fun because I know my church, very small Presbyterian church here in Smyrna, Georgia, grew during the pandemic. We were only
Yeah.
closed for 5 weeks, and
Mm.
literally people would come because they said like y'all are the only church that was open. Like we would keep our doors open, for people's conscience. So like our physical outside of doors were open, and people
Yeah.
said we would stop by, and we've grown significantly. I talked to James Coates, and if I'm not mistaken, his church doubled in
Yeah.
size, almost almost 2.5 times. Now, of course, numbers are not the
Correct.
aim and the focus. However, when you're trying to be faithful to the Lord and you see growth like that, you can't help but say, like, man, these people are coming not because of the light machines and the fog
Hmm.
machines and the skinny jeans, but they're coming because of the good sound teaching. You know
Yeah.
what? Praise God for that. So I
Yeah.
think there is an instance and a time that you can be like a little, you can, like
Yeah.
God, that's all right. So,
Tim Stevens' church, they just bought new property.
oh, really?
So they're no longer in that church, and they were like 100 when they started. The whole right before the lockdowns, they were like 70, 80 people.
Yeah.
Now they're at 700 people, and they're already outgrowing the new church that they bought. So they sold that church, bought a bigger church, I think closer to downtown in Calgary, and they're thriving. And I'm going to a conference not next week, but the following week, a new conference at Tim Stevens Church. I think James Coates will be there. Some pastors from Grace will be there. I think
Mhm.
John MacArthur will be doing zooming in,
Yep.
um, and Harry Walls and a few other gentlemen from Grace Church. I believe it's called King and His Kingdom. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the first like Canadian conference like that.
Oh my
ever.
gosh.
And they're going to play the film, and we're going to hand it out free there up in Canada. And that's going to be kind of special to be back there, and because he was part of that story, and to watch
Oh
the
yeah.
film in his new church.
That is amazing. Well, thank you for telling me that. Hopefully, I would love to talk with Tim. I would love to
Yeah,
have a
I'm sure he'll
conversation with
talk
him.
to you.
Oh
I'm sure he'll
yeah.
talk to you. I can give
Just
you his. I can give you his number when we
when we get
are
done.
done here. Yeah.
When you give me your credit card number. All right.
Yeah, that, my credit card number, all.
Oh, absolutely everything. All right.
He'll be
Um,
disappointed.
well, I do want to thank you because I know you're busy. You're in Kentucky at the ARC experience. You're doing Answers to Pastors is the name of
Something
the
like that.
conference, something like
I should
that.
know the name. I should know. I just show up and they tell me what tell me where I'm supposed to go. But yeah, it's Answers in Genesis. I've never been here. I've been
Right.
impressed thus far. I haven't gone inside the ark, but this afternoon I walked and looked at it. I don't. Have
Mhm.
you ever been here?
I've not.
It's
So
it's epic. I mean, it
I've
looks.
heard.
It's really. I thought it was going to possibly be cheesy. It is not. It's really well done. I haven't been inside, but I'm impressed thus far.
I love it. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your time tonight because I know you're busy. I appreciate you sitting down and rapping with us, talking with us, and I'll make sure that everybody, if you have any other questions for about the movie, please check out the link that I'm putting in the chat one more time, and it's theessentialchurchmovie.com. There, I'm Shannon just said that there will be streaming starts tomorrow, so you'll be able to stream it from different platforms, Apple and so on and so forth like that. But then also, if you want to buy a physical copy of it, you can do that through the website there as well. So you can have a copy just for your keepsake and be able to share with friends and neighbors when they come over and stuff like that. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Anything else that on your mind or hearts, anything like that?
No, I think we covered it all. I really appreciate the time that I had to talk with you, and that people have interest. I'm always I feel so blessed.
Yeah.
I guess I'll share that with your audience. I just recognize God's sovereign hand in my life and putting me in this position to be able to be a part of this and use what I've been working at, and honing the craft of storytelling through visual storytelling, filmmaking for I don't know
Mhm.
how many years, and to be able to do it in this kind of way is it's not lost on me how the Lord is sovereign in that. I mean, I didn't know. I go to Grace Community Church, and I'm a filmmaker that happens to go to Grace Community Church. And John MacArthur didn't know me. I didn't know him, and yet
Mhm.
the Lord in His kindness, and that's really my fault. I could go up and talk to the man anytime I want, but it's a big church. I don't want to. He gets that kind of stuff all the time. People are walking
Sure.
down to him, want him to sign his Bible, and I'm like, I'm not going to bother him. So to sit down and talk with him, and just be in his office, and have dinners with him and lunches with him, and sit with him and watch the movie I made that he's in at the premiere, and it was just really special. And I didn't try for that to happen, and just God in His sovereignty blessed me in that way. And
Amen.
I recognize that. I recognize God's mercy and sovereignty in my life, and that it affects me, and I love it. So
Amen. Amen. I appreciate that. Thank you so very much for that. All right. So, everybody, please check out the link, and we dropped it in the chat. Thank you, moderators, for helping out as well. And hopefully, we'll drive those views up tomorrow or when it launches on streaming. I don't know how they keep track of that stuff, but hopefully, you'll see a good bump in it. And as we're sharing it with others and such like that. So, everybody, I thank you all so much for hanging out with us on this evening. And I'll make sure all the links to everything that we talked about today is in the description for this video when it goes up. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all real soon. Take care, everybody. Grace and peace. And trying something.